Before we start to paint the Monstera, we have to mix some shades of green to paint with. So again, I'm going to be mixing just right here in my lid of my paint tin, but we also have these plastic mixing trays available to mix colors in. The first thing you always want to do with watercolor is put a drop of water in each pan with your paintbrush, or one tool that I have that you can get for free at the pharmacy is this dropper. I use that a lot. But you can do the same thing with your paintbrush. And then I'm going to drop a bit of water into each section of my pan. When I'm painting, I rarely use a color straight out of the pan. I like to mix all of my colors. So I'm going to start by mixing a yellow-green. So really loading my brush up with yellow and putting some yellow in this pan right here. And then rinsing that, grabbing some green and putting that in. And that will be a nice bright green. I actually want it to be just a little bit brighter. One thing you'll notice while I'm mixing is that I have these paper towels under me. You always want to have like a handful of paper towels with you when you're painting. Okay, next I'm going to put plain green down. But like I said, I almost never use plain green by itself. So I'm gonna grab just like the tiniest bit of brown and put that in there, just to have a little bit less of a green, such a saturated bright green. I want to dull it slightly. Then I do love like a really dull, almost an olive green. So to achieve that, a little more water in this one, I'm gonna use quite a bit of brown. And again, you can test it on your paper towel. I'm pretty happy with that. I might do just a little bit more. Okay, rinse your brush. And then up here, we're going to add in some blue to our green. Blue is a very strong color, so it will take over the green if you're not careful. So kind of go with small dips and just add in bit by bit until you get kind of a nice teal. You can, again, check it on your paper towel if you want. And then I want a yellow that isn't quite so bright yellow. So to dull it out, I'm actually going to use its complement, which is purple. Just such a small amount though, because you can see just a little bit really goes quite a long ways in dulling that yellow. So I'm going to add more yellow to it. Okay. And those are the main colors I'm going to be using. In the example, I showed you how I used a pop of color with orange. So you can do that, or you could actually do that with pink. So a little bit of red and a lot of water, or you could add some purple. That could be fun. I think I might add some purple in this time, just for some variation. So I'm gonna put some purple right there and just kind of let it sit for now. Okay, and that's how we mix our colors for the Monstera leaf. Now we're going to begin the painting section of the Monstera leaf. For this painting, we're going to be using wet into wet watercolor painting techniques, and we're going to do some color blooming. So I'll explain that as we go. But the most important thing to know right away is, if you look at my example here, we're going to be painting section by section. So we're going to hop around the painting because we don't want the sections to bleed into each other. We want these white lines in between. You can see here my section's touched, and that's like totally fine. So if that happens, don't worry. But yeah, wherever we drew a pencil line, it's going to become a white line in our painting. So let's start with this bottom section right here. And I'm going to use my smaller watercolor brush because it's a smaller section. And I'm just going to grab a green. It can be totally random. I grabbed the green that I put just a little bit of brown into. And I'm going to paint up, not quite to touching that pencil line. And let's say you wanted like a bit of a pop of green in there, you could dip your paint right into the green pan. So I have like a lot of saturated green paint on my brush right now, and I'm just gonna dip that in. And that's wet into wet, but also I don't want it to just be green. So this is where I want to start adding some of those other colors. So here I added some of that blue-green. And I'm also going to add a drop of that yellow, a couple drops of that yellow. And then that's called color blooming, and I'm just gonna let that mix on the page together. Now I had mentioned we're gonna kind of hop around the painting and paint in sections. I have to be especially careful because I'm left-handed. So I'm gonna actually flip my painting over because I don't wanna drag my hand into the paint. And I'm gonna grab this olive green, which is green mixed with brown, and I'm actually just mixing it a little bit more right now, okay? And I'm gonna lay some onto this top section. And again, going right up to those pencil lines, maybe not quite touching them, but like right up to them. And I think what makes this painting really special is the sort of variation of colors that you create within the greens by mixing all these different colors. Now I'm going to go back in and add some color pops. So I'm going to grab some of this yellow green and pop that in and let that blend. And then along the center spine, I like to have a darker color. So this is where I'm going to drop in that unexpected purple. And again, I'm just going to let it bloom and mix on its own. I'm not going to mix it for it. Now here you can see we have like a puddle of paint. You can dab that with a small piece of tissue or paper towel. If you just set it right on top of it, try not to touch the painting too much, just right on top, it'll absorb that extra paint, and then you won't have that like puddle sitting there. So I'm turning my painting again so I don't get my hands messy or smear the paint. And I'm going to switch to a bigger brush because I'm going to paint this bigger section here. I'm going to start with my yellow green this time and painting right up to, but not over those pencil lines. Again, if you accidentally paint over the pencil line, that is no big deal. And since this is a smaller section, since this is a bigger section, I'm gonna do some color blooming here while the paint is still nice and wet. I'm gonna grab some of that teal and put that right along the edge there. And then go back to my yellow green and continue painting this section. If you find that your paint is too dark, too saturated, just go ahead and add some water to your brush or add some water to the pan or the plastic thing that you're mixing in, the plastic palette. Okay, I'm getting some really pretty color blooming going on there, but I want to just add some more in. So I'm going to add some of that olive on top there and kind of all along this side. And I'm going to rinse. And I'm going to add that yellow down along the edge here and kind of just let it do its thing again. And it'll turn into some really pretty color blossoming that's really unique to watercolor. You can only achieve with watercolor. So you'll notice I skipped this section right here because if I accidentally touched these two, they would start to bleed together, and we don't want that just yet. We want to try to have these nice crisp white lines in between. So now I'm gonna once again turn my painting and I'm gonna grab some green and start painting in this section here. I almost touched, but there is a little bit of white there. So I'm gonna try to keep that there because we want a white line down the center as well. And I'm gonna make this green a little more saturated on my palette. So what I'm doing is I'm just grabbing some green from the pan here and mixing it in. And then, but remember, I don't like to use straight green. So I did add a little bit of that brown in, and I'm gonna do that again, just to keep it from being too bright green. And I really like that shade of green there. So I'm gonna finish painting this section of watercolor with this green, and then add my pops of color in. And I'm definitely gonna do some purple in this section. Maybe bring it out a little bit further into the leaf this time. And then some yellow in this tip here. Now, I think this tip is dry enough that I can paint the one next to it. So I want to show you how to make sure you're getting that white center line. So I'm going to use my smaller brush, and I want to do something that's kind of contrasting to what I have there. So I'm going to use this yellow green, and I don't want them to touch if I can help it. If they do a little, that's fine. And there I have the beginning of my center line. And we can, of course, go ahead and add a color. I think adding some orange might be fun, even though I have purple as my accent color. The fun of watercolors to me is really just like playing with color. And so I'm just gonna add a little bit of orange into that one. And I might even go back on top of it with a little bit of green, just to kind of like, so it's not so bright, bright orange, but having those kind of fun mixes of color. Okay, so that is how we do that, the painting, just step by step in each section. I'm gonna switch to time lapse now so you guys can see a quicker version of the painting. Once the painting is dry, you can go back in and erase any pencil lines that are left over. And that concludes the Monstera leaf painting lesson with Eileen Binkley. Thanks for joining me today. You can find me on Instagram at Eileen Binkley Art, or my website is www.eileenbinkleyart.com. Thanks again.